We turn now to a reading of the gospel lesson in the lectionary for today in Mark chapter 12, verses 38 through 44. Listen again now for the word of God. As Jesus taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance, they say long prayers. They will receive greater condemnation." Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. Then a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and he said to them, "Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury, for all of them have contributed out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all that she had to live on." Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. What are you bringing to the table is the question before the house today. What are you bringing to the table? It's a question we ask in every area of our lives. Isn't it a business deal? Here's what we're bringing to the deal. What are you bringing to the table? Or think of a church night supper. A through H bring vegetables, so-and-so bring entrees, so-and-so bring desserts. What are you bringing to the table? It's a family holiday dinner, and it's going to be potluck, and everyone in the family pitches in. We have staff lunches here every month to celebrate birthdays, and we bring things to that potluck. Now, I don't know how to cook, so I always bring chips, but I bring something because everybody else does, and I don't want to be the only one who doesn't participate in one way or another. We see that same thing happening in the Exodus passage that was read just a few moments ago, where everyone brought grand and glorious gifts to the building of the tabernacle and to the administration of it. It is a part of our life, every part of our life, work, family, church. We all bring something to the table. And after all, it's stewardship season. Oh boy, say the visitors, of all the Sundays for me to come and visit and try out this church, I had to come on Stewardship Sunday. Where's the nearest exit, you're thinking? No, worry not, because this message is not so much about money, it's about you. So the question is not, what are you bringing to the table? The question is, what are you bringing to the table? Let me suggest 3 things as we look at these texts this morning. The first thing you bring and I bring are our deepest hurts and disappointments and longings. If we're really honest with God and ourselves, that's the first thing we bring. And we bring it every week. We come, we have our game face on as we go to Sunday school or meet people in the parlor, but the truth is God knows about the things that are really going on down inside us. And we bring those hurts and disappointments. The disciples did. We see it throughout the Gospels. They brought their worries over the future, their anxieties about what was going to happen to them and to their Lord. And Mark says that even after the crucifixion and the resurrection, they brought their stubborn disbelief. So the question is, what are we bringing when we come Sunday after Sunday? What are we bringing to this table? There is not a person in this room or watching by live stream today who is not hurting in some way or another. As one person said it to me recently, everyone you meet has a pool of tears. It's like the young woman in the Scottish church, just a little Scottish church. She's sitting there crying over her own sin. She knows the kind of person she has not been for the Lord, and she wonders if she is worthy to partake of the Lord's Supper as the tray is coming toward her. And from behind her, she hears a kind older gentleman's voice saying, "Take it, lassie, it's for sinners, take it." We all bring these hurts and disappointments to this table. And at the root of these hurts and disappointments is a longing for something that we cannot seem to get on our own. It's a longing for something we can't get out there. In James Redfield's Celestine Prophecy, that mystical book about that ancient manuscript discovered in the rainforests of Peru, the character Charlene says that the problem human beings have is there is a restlessness, a terrible restlessness. It's a restless searching that is behind the me first attitude that has characterized recent decades and has affected everyone from Wall Street to street gangs. And what is this restlessness? What is it that we're bringing to the table, whether we're scribes or Pharisees or the poor widow in this story? It is the realization that pleasure by itself ultimately will never bring us real joy. Jungian psychiatrist Jeffrey Suttenover puts it this way. He says, the truth is human beings require something more than mere pleasure, because the pursuit of pleasure by itself, apart from the Spirit, leads only to emptiness and despair. And to worship pleasure is to seek death, he says. A conundrum that Freud described but could not find a way out of for himself. So what we are really bringing to the table is a longing for our ultimate destiny, which of course is God. Buechner puts it this way. In a sense, we are all hungry and in need. And we need something we cannot get on our own. But we don't recognize it. The widow recognizes it, but everyone else misses the point. Buechner goes on to say, you know, we have plenty of food in the deep freeze. And when we have plenty of food in the deep freeze, or a roof over our heads and cars in the garage, we assume that the blues we are feeling deep inside us can be cured by a weekend in the country, or an extra martini at lunch, or purchasing a new dress, or a new car. But the poor are under no such delusion. They have almost nothing, and so they have to turn to God. And that's what the poor widow does in this story. Some people suggest that many Christians only darken the door of the church 3 or 4 times in their life, at least 3. Baptism, marrying, and burying. Now, I'm not talking about the C&E crowd. You know, they at least come twice a year, Christmas and Easter. You know, the C&E crowd, you know what I'm talking about. Preachers use that term. You all aren't part of that because you're here today. But some people only come 3 times. Baptism, marrying, and burying. And 2 of those times you're carried in, except for Zach today. He came on his own today. Thank God for you, Zach. But most Presbyterians are carried in. Baptism and the funeral. One person has described baptism, marrying, and burying as hatchin', matchin', and dispatchin'. One way to describe it. But the truth is, not everybody gets married, and marriage is really only a symbol of the real marriage that we have with Christ. So the 3 that we ought to name of the times that many people come to church are baptism, communion, and the funeral. And each time we are coming, bringing these hurts and disappointments to the table, whether we're coming every week or just coming 3 times in our lives. There is this restlessness that plagues the human spirit. St. Augustine put it this way: our hearts are restless, O Lord, until they rest in Thee. So the first thing we bring to the table are our hurts and disappointments and our deepest longing for something more. The second thing we bring is the reality that only we and God know for sure what we're bringing to the table. Jesus sat at the treasury that day and watched every single person put in whatever offering it was. And I've been trying to figure this out. What the heck is he doing? Why? Isn't Jesus solely into spiritual things, and heavenly things, theological things? Why is this visionary suddenly acting like a serious bottom line guy? What is the deal with this? He's checking out what everybody is giving. I mean, it should be nobody's business what I give, right? I know someone who said, the only thing that another member and I can agree on is what the third one should contribute. Yeah? You ever think about that for a moment? I mean, we all have ideas of what everybody else should be doing, don't we? I had a woman come up to me recently and said, Dr. I love that sermon you gave on taming the tongue. Could I have some copies? I know some people who really need to read it. We have ideas about what everybody else should be doing. We have ideas, maybe like to know whatever. No, it's nobody's business what anybody gives except Jesus. Jesus is the only one who really knows. He's the only one that counts. And the good news is he sees us differently than the way the world does. That's why he singled out the poor widow that day, because he could see what she was really doing and what it really meant to her. I had a friend once, he's long gone now, amazing man named Andy Eddington. He used to do a lot of ministry in prisons, especially in prisons where there are convicted murderers. In fact, he wanted to do that. He preferred speaking about the Bible to those who were on death row and had no chance to get out. And they packed the prison chapel whenever Andy spoke. One night he had spoken and he asked if anyone had a question, and the first hand went up, was right on the front row, and Andy knew that this particular man had been convicted of 6 murders and was serving 4 consecutive life sentences. He said, Dr. Eddington, I have a question. So are you saying that I have the same shot at heaven and will have the same treatment when I get there that you who have been teaching the Bible all your life will have? No, said Andy, I didn't say that. But the Bible does. If it were up to me, I'd get special treatment. I'd have a limousine service and I'd have a mansion, a huge mansion. But it's not up to me. And God sees us differently. So yes, you will have a place there too. That's the great news, isn't it? God sees us differently no matter what we give or how we do it. And that's the second big point that we want to make. But then there is a third one, and that is that our giving, what we bring to the table, is a measure of our love for God. And God will do more with it than we could ever imagine, as he does with this story about the poor widow, because think of the multitudes of people who have given through the centuries just from hearing this one tiny little story about this poor widow. You see, this isn't really about cash. It's about you and your love of God. What you bring to the table is a measure of your love for God. You know, someone once suggested that a person's budget is not merely a matter of accounting. It's actually a theological document that tells us what you really worship, who you really worship. And your financial planner should be helping you understand this is a theological document. We now see what's really important to you in the way you're budgeting now and for the future. And it's not about the amount when you bring things to the table. It's about the proportion. That's why a percentage is so important. We've talked about this before, how we're trying to get everybody moving toward tithing, which is 10%. And if you're only at 2%, then next year let's go to 3%. And the next year grow to 4%. Eventually you'll get there and you will feel the joy of Jesus the more you give. You see, what happened with this woman is she allowed Jesus to get under her skin and into her heart. When was the last time you allowed Jesus to get under your skin like that and into your heart? The ones who were giving large sums didn't get the point. They didn't understand. Now, don't misunderstand. Don't take this text as a statement that says you should just give everything like the poor widow. You know, some cult leaders and TV preachers try to do that. They try to push you that way. That's not what this text means. Someone once sent me a little card, and on the front it said evangelical scorecard, and it had a preacher on the front, and the caption said, "Send in everything you have." Inside it read, "Consider yourself saved." That's not the point. Jesus is not talking here about salvation by works. He's talking about giving from a humble heart. And that's what this woman did, in a way no one else did that day at the temple treasury. When was the last time you gave from a humble heart because of who Jesus is to you and not an IRS deduction or calculation? I love how Jesus uses this whole scene as a teachable moment. And if you notice in the Gospels, he has a lot of teachable moments because his disciples are knuckleheads. They are not getting. They completely miss what he's trying to say or what he's really doing or what he's all about. And you can just picture it. It's right there in the text. You can even see it and you can feel it in the Greek. Hey guys, come on over here. Wait a minute. Come over here. Look at this. I want you to see this woman and what she just did. You mean the one who just threw in a couple of coins? Yeah, that's the one. And what he does here is very radical for its day because he lifts up 3 examples of underclass as the model for how to give. 3 examples. A woman, in that time, had no authority or power. A widow, who is completely vulnerable with no authority or power. And one who is poor. No authority, no power, and completely vulnerable. And that's the one, the disciples, you just hear them elbowing. That's the one he's lifting up as the good giver? Yeah, that's the one. She gives everything, and even her next meal. Now, sometimes we don't have a choice, do we? When John D. Rockefeller died, one of the wealthiest men of his era, someone asked his chief accountant, "How much did Mr. Rockefeller leave behind?" The accountant replied, "Everything, duh. You can't take it with you." And so what we're seeing in this story, in thinking about what you're bringing to the table, is a hint. It's just a hint of what we will do at the end of our life. I've been trying to figure out all week, why did Jesus single out this poor widow? What is the deal with this? It's just totally countercultural. And then it hit me. What she does is a hint to the suffering he will experience on the cross for you and for me. So think about the Last Supper for just a moment. What did Jesus bring to that church night supper? At the table with his disciples. You think about it. He didn't bring vegetables. He didn't bring dessert. He didn't bring an entree. He brought himself. He brought all he had. Like the woman, like the widow, he was all in. And what does he say to us at the table? This is my body, which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me as you come to the table. To this one be all honor and blessing and glory and praise from this day forth and forevermore. God bless you all.